Hi beautiful people, welcome to the fourth part of the tutorial on how to make scientific drawing on Clip Studio Paint. And as you can see, I discarded the last example so I can show you a cleaner example and a more useful example for me. And as you can see, I created two folders, the Cellula Sporofito on the right side and the Antocero on the left side. They are on their individual folders, so I can show you faster the things that I want to show you. Obviously, below it all, it is the photograph that we use in the last example, and I created the layer for the ruler, for the inks that it is already almost done, the draft that it is also set on blue and with less opacity, and the detail layer, but I'm going to hide it for the time being. So I haven't finished the lines, but we will do it in this video. As you can see, if you remember, I used a vector layer to make the inks. When you put your mouse on top of, or your pen on top of your line, you can see a lot of little dots that represent where you can move your line. Those are the control points. On the last video, I told you that you could make like a rough line in your inks, and then select everything with the simplify vector line, and then make adjustments. That is especially useful if you are using mouse, or if you are not confident enough with your pen. But if you have managed to improve with your drawing on a tablet, then you can skip that step. For example, in this case, I made almost no use of the simplify vector line, but in this case I use it a lot. So it will depend on how confident you are, and obviously the drawing in particular, how much the simplify vector tool you use. So I will keep making the inks, and then I will explain what I did. As you can see, or I hope you can see, I won't use the mouse at all. I'm just using the one by Wacom drawing tablet. And remember that, as I showed you on the last video, of course you can do this with mouse, but it will be more difficult, more cumbersome to do it that way. And obviously, if you do it with mouse, you have to make this in a vector layer. So as you can see, sometimes my line doesn't get as beautiful as I wanted, but it is as simple as to simplify the vector line and then adjust. So I recommend to you that you learn the shortcuts on the keyboard, but also you can customize them, so it will be as you want. Okay. So as you can see, sometimes I need to simplify, and sometimes I need to connect the vector line, but not always. You will get better with the drawing tablet in time. but the vector, so maybe there will be a time where you don't need the vector layer. All the same, it is very useful. So I'm going to show you the draft layer so you can see what difference I made with the ink layer. So as you can see, not everything is the same on the inks and on the draft. The but that is because on the draft layer I just made a rough sketch, so the person that was going to give me the okay told me if I am correct or if I was wrong. And as you can see, for example, here I made a structure that doesn't go there. Well, I didn't know that. So for example, I already inked the dust parts, and obviously we can just go to vector eraser, erase the whole line, and it is done. So if I zoom out, I can say that the drawing, the inks are already done. This is, I will have to add this last part, and now we can move along with the detail layer. Okay, yeah, I'm just correcting the line and we are done. Okay, so what does details imply? Mm, Obviously, it will depend on your drawing. So, for example, in this case, the author told me that everything that appears orange needed to be shadowed, so it can imply the thickness of the wall. And if I recall correctly, she told me that it needed to be on a gradient, so the top part was thicker than the lower part. So I will then shadow all the orange parts. So to do this, it will depend entirely up to you on how you do it, because there are people who like to do this just with the fill tool, and they just fill the parts that are needed. So in this case, obviously, I will lower the opacity because black is too dark, and for example in this color, so it will be a gradient. So I will, oh, darn, that happened because as you can see the line is not closed. There are a lot of parts that are open, so I will need to close the lines. So when I use the fill tool, for example like on this, it will just fill where it is closed. Nothing. That way it will just fill where it is closed. So okay, then we go to our millipen tool. I put a dot in here, and pressing shift I click or put another dot on the other side, and it will make a straight line. Okay, now we do it the other way. Press shift, make a dot, and it's already done. Now on top, and again to the other side. This way I have closed my drawing. So when I use the fill tool, I will lower the opacity to 24, and okay, it is already there. So the part on top is a little bit darker than the part below. So of course I don't want it to be like in a square. So I just use the vector eraser and get rid of the lines. But okay, so I made a mistake because I made the lines. I closed the drawing on the detail layer, not on the ink layer. So we do it again. Make a dot, shift, and put a dot, and there is the line. Okay, okay. That way, by making mistakes, you can see why sometimes you don't get what you want. It's okay. Now it's already done. Now I go to the ink layer, erase the straight lines, and it is done. It was very easy, isn't it? So this is one way, but a lot of people don't like this, don't like to feel the areas that way. I am one of those people. I think it is not. It doesn't look good to me, but maybe there are people who may consider differently. So another way to do it is what I did on that cell that it's already drawn. So what we are going to do, what I did with that cell that is alone. So when I show the draft to the author, I told her, I want, if you want, I can fill that area that you are asking me with the fill tool, and I show what I did, and she told me that that was awful. uh, and then I show her this technique that is to make a lot of dots, and obviously she wants to make me suffer, and she told me no, the dots are the ideal way. So there are two ways to make this effect, and one is very tedious, very time consuming, but it will give you more control over your drawing. And the other one, of course, it is faster, lots faster, but you have a little less control on how the drawing is done. So the first one is obviously to change your brush size, for example here, and just go like that, dot by dot, like that. You will have to go dot by dot until you feel all of yourself. So as you can listen from my voice, this is very tedious, but it will give you more control on the effect that you make. So for example, if I want it to look less thick, then I separate the dots a lot, and if I want it to look more thick, then I just put the dots next to each other. So this way you may have to spend hours making this, and it is awful, but it will give you more control. And the other one is okay, you go to pen, and as you can see, I change a little bit of the parameters that are shown on the tool. I will show you how to do it. So you go to this tool, and you go to spraying effect and enable the things that I have enabled. As you can see, they change on the left side when I enable or disable them. And that's the one. And I think also gap um, gap is useful for what I was aiming for, but I didn't know how to use it. So I will leave it like that for the time being. So if I draw with the spraying effect, it will change how the tool is interpreted by the program. So if I enable the spraying effect and change this, you can see in the preview how it is going to be seen. So for example, I set it like this, and of course the spraying effect makes it look different, but this is not what I was aiming for. So if I put the particle density lower, lower, and lower, it looks more like I wanted it to show. That way you can set what you want. This is with the spray deviation. And also with the gap, but as I showed you, I told you I don't know how to use it yet, but I will learn how to do it. So with the spraying effect enabled, the particle size will change the size of the dots, while the brush size will change the area those dots will occupy. So for example, if I set it on 10, it will make this area, but if I change it to 30, it will cover more ground. So if I want it to be like its neighbor, then I will have to go to particle size, make it bigger in 4. Let's see how it looks. Nope, too big. So in 3, and it is okay. So you can adjust what you need, and as you can see, the more I pass the pen on a single area, the more thick it will look. But obviously this is too much, so I don't want it to be like this. I want it to look like its neighborhood, so I'm going to leave it in 20, and with a lot of care, very slowly, I am going to do it like this. But if you are not confident enough that you can do it this way, I will show you a different way to do it. So for example, this way, there are a lot of little holes, so I set the brush size a little lower and just fill where I think it is needed. But on some areas it looks um, a little more full than I intended to look. But I think it is okay. But if you need, for example, that it has certain effect, then you can do it with this. What you are going to what you are going to change mainly is the brush size and also the particle size, the particle density, to have different effects. I think this is the best density and the best particle size. So the other way to do it is just how I showed you how to close the line, close the drawing a few minutes ago. You put a dot, then press shift, and just made a straight line. That way you go from the outside to the inside and close all your cell. Obviously the program tells me that I'm using shift, so I don't make any mistakes. And that is that. As you can see, I think the results are very similar. One way, the first one I did it by hand, and the other one was pressing shift, but the result is pretty similar. So in this case, for example, the way I filled this cell, the first one, maybe it can be useful for the cell walls that are below. That way you can make a different gradient of density. But of course, that is just one way to do it. You can change your brush size to something smaller. For example, if I did my lines on 5, then I do the details on 4, and you go like that, dot by dot. But it will be so much slower. But you can do it that way. Mm, so obviously, you can see that this looks very different. And this wasn't intentional, but this is something that will be useful for the next drawing. Of course, you have to be careful with how you do the dots, because if you do it fast, it can make some effects that you are not intend to do. For example, these lines that are more thick. So if you're not interested in making a pattern, the spraying effect is very useful. But the pattern effects, making dots, is very useful for the drawing for another time or another type of detail. So this kind of effect is very useful for drawings like this that need shadows, different details, and other effects that are very important for the drawing. And maybe the spraying effect can't give me those effects that I'm aiming for. So now let's begin with this drawing. I did the I did the draft for this drawing, and she told me, for example, that this was two different structures, so I was wrong. And we are going to make a different effect that we haven't used yet. Okay, so what I want to do here is first we're going to ink. So I go to 5, that is the brush size that I use for my inks. And let me just check something before we start. Okay, so okay, now let's begin. Just let me finish the draft. There they are, the two different parts. And the author told me, for example, that these lines were too thick, that they are like wrong, and that these structures are not on top of everything else. They are embedded, so the line has to have a different effect. And in this case, it also is wrong because it needs to be not like a closed structure. So, okay, now the draft is done. On the inks, I want to show that there are parts that are on top of each other. So, and there are other parts of the drawing that are farther away. So, if I want to show like a 3D effect, one thing I can do is I can change the brush size to make different different effects of depth. So for this, we are going to use again the vector layer. So first, we are going to ink. Well, I am going to ink with the brush size at number 5. And here I recommend you, of course, this is depending on whether you are good with the drawing tablet or not yet, but I think that it is better for you to start with small lines because it is more likely that you will lose control if you are trying to do a very long line. If you keep your lines very short, then you will have more control over them. That way, if you are just starting or maybe you don't have enough control, um, smaller lines will be better suited for you to remain in control of the drawing. So that way you don't have to erase or press Ctrl C every time you make a mistake. Also, I recommend to you that you start your drawing, your line where you cut the line before. So when you use the connect lines with the vector tool, it will be faster. In this drawing, I am aiming for a more natural look, so I am giving it the line a lot of curves, so it doesn't look like a straight line. Also remember that if you don't feel comfortable, then you can, of course, change the stabilization to a higher value so you can be more comfortable with your lines. So for example, again in this part, the structure has like a 3D effect because it is getting closer to the camera. I am not making it seem that way, but we will do it later. So again, I'm going to cheat a little. So instead of just following the draft line, I'm just making a straight line. A straight line, and then I will change it with a vector with the control point. So in this case, it is not that important. I can make it that way. Now I am going to be careful again with these parts because if I try to move control points in these parts, it is going to be awful. But with the straight lines, it can be simpler. Okay, so again, I'm going to make a straight line. Oh god, what was that? So if you have problems making some straight lines, like I am, you can rotate your canvas using the in the keyboard the letter R and keep it pressed So that way you can change the rotation of your canvas. That is if you wanted to move it freely, but you can also press the buttons here if you want to move it in a set angle or to return it to its original orientation. So that way you can be faster if you can't make a straight line when the canvas is in certain position. So I think that for the people that draw with the microscope attachment that I told you in the last video, this will be like not so difficult to do because that is in some way like what they do. Of course, there will be adjustments to do because your hand and your brain are not coordinated to work on a tablet, but it will be faster than you expect it to be, especially if you know how to draw already. Okay, so now we are done with the with the main line. So I will connect the lines to keep it everything on the same line. But as you can see, it is not as obvious where the lines are connected because I had a lot of care to make the lines connect to each other from the beginning. This is just to make sure if I want to move them, then I can do it this way more fast. Now I will modify this part so that they are like in the draft. I will simplify, but not the whole line, just the parts that I think are needed to make the drawing better. So, okay, for example, I don't need a lot of points, I just need some of them. And I zoom in that much because I don't want to grab the control points of the lines next to it. And you can take a little bit of time here depending on whether you try to put it like with much care as I am trying to do, or not. If you just are if you are happy just putting it to where the line is. I am deleting some of the control points, and you can make your line different. Remember, by adding or deleting control points. So, for example, I deleted more than I wanted, so maybe I am going to add a little more. Thanks for saving this thing for me. And we are done with this one. Now to the next one. So as you can see, just by using the control points, I make my line to be like the draft. So maybe if an sketcher or an illustrator looks at what we are doing, they may think that this is like cheating. But we are biologists. We are not illustrators. So I think that if we can use the tools that the technology has put on our hands, why won't we use them? And remember that not everyone is an illustrator. Not every biologist know how to draw. So sorry. So now I am going to connect the lines. Switch the corner so I can give it a more rounded look. Add more control points and finish this. Also, if you want it to look more rounded, then get the control points more close to each other, and then you have the effect. I'm going to add a little more. And now it is done. Now we do the same here, but I will simplify it a little bit. It isn't as necessary as with the other one. So I am not going to close the drawing because in the photograph it is that way. And now I am just going to erase some of them. And move the control points. Again, I'm here. I'm going to delete some of the control points because there are a lot. So you can go uh, line by line like I do, or you can move what you see and then move to another part of the drawing. It's up to you. Also be careful with not moving the control points of another line when they are too close. So I recommend to you that you zoom in a lot, because that way you can be more careful. So I think we are done. Yeah. So now that the main part is done, I will go with the details, but that will be done on the detail layer. I am going to do what I told you first, that the part that it is farther away from the camera is a little less thick than the part that is near the camera. What we're going to do is change the width of the line. So you may be wondering, but if you already draw everything on 5, what are you going to do? Draw it again? No, I am going to go to adjust line width and then change the line to the size that I want it. So if I want the line to look smaller because it is farther away, then I will have to change it to a size like 4. And the part that is nearest, then I will have to change it to be like a 6. So I go to the adjust line width tool and then I can choose to thicken or to narrow the line. So I don't know if you noticed, but I will show you the first drawing, and in this drawing I made the line different. The part that I did while you were watching is different to what I draw alone. So it may happen that you first draw on one brush size and you leave your drawing because you are tired or something like that, and when you return the next day you don't consider that your line is different, that you are making it on a thicker or a narrower brush size. But and if you are using a raster layer, it means that you will have to erase everything and start again. But with the vector layer, you are just going to select adjust line width, select your line, and then as you can see, it will change the width of the line. But also, if you just select a part of the line, it will just thicken that part. This can be useful if you are aiming for that effect. That is what we are going to do on the Antocero. But in this case, I want the whole line to be thicker. So I am going to enable process whole line, and then I will do it again. And now the program is making thicker all my line. So now that we are done with this one, I will go again to Antocero. And of course, I don't want the whole line to be processed. So I disable again the process whole line, and I change the parameter to a little bit smaller, and I then just select what I want. So it may be that zero point 0.5 is not as a big a difference that some people may think, but in your drawing it can have a big impact depending on all the other effects that you add to it. So here I am going to thicken the line by 1 point, and as you can see, it can make a difference. And I can add, so for example, this is like the line in this part is 5, then goes into 5.4, and then finishes on 6. And I believe it looks different. So it may be not as notorious as someone might think, but you can add the thickness, and obviously when you saw it from afar, it will be very notorious that this part is thicker than this part. So you can go and adjust the width of the line to make different effects. So now I am going to go to details, and remember, if you select a layer and that stop sign appears, it means that it is hidden, that your layer is hidden. So just press the I so you can show it and you can start drawing. So in this case I showed the author of the paper the spraying effect in this part to show her the effect that it could do. And obviously, if you started your drawing and then save it and continue the other day, and you don't recall the tool that you were using, then you will have to, like this, change the different parameters until you find what you were doing the previous day. So in this case, I believe the spraying effect is not as useful as I want it to be. So I will go with without the spraying effect. And for example, in this, if you recall, I told you that this was embedded. So then I have to make this kind of effect that it will be very difficult to achieve it with a spraying effect. So I go through all the lines. And here you will have to draw what you need. In this case, I want it to be really close, but also to have that effect that it is a discontinued line. And also remember that when you are using the drawing tablet, the eraser will depend on how much pressure you apply to the drawing tablet. So for example, I'm going to show you in this line, if I press the pen all the way, it will erase all the line, but if I do it gently, then it will be different. So, and with mouse, remember that the line will be in the brush, in the size of the brush that you selected. So if you selected 30, it will erase everything. This is with the mouse. It's like if you are using all the pressure with a drawing tablet. So maybe, as I told you before, with the drawing tablet, the brush size of the eraser is not as important, but if you are using a mouse, then it is. So I insist, you can make this with a mouse. Of course you can do it, but you will take a long time because all the drawing would be needed to be modified with the vector line. So returning to the details, in this kind of drawing, I prefer to do them with the dot by dot technique. The spraying effect, I don't use it as much because it doesn't give me the control that I need. So as I will show you here, the effect that I am achieving with the dot by dot is very different as the effect that I used with the embedded structures, and I wouldn't be able to achieve it with the spraying effect. So as I told you, I have a lot more of control with just dot by dot. So I didn't, okay, so this is different from the draft layer. So I'm going to change it. Bear with me a little. It will be quick. Okay. This is why I think the vector layer is very useful, because then if you already inked on a raster layer or in or in Photoshop, for example, and then you show your picture and it is different, you don't have to erase. You just move some control points and you are already done. If you are not the expert, I think it is very important that you show first the ink layer to see if everything is okay, and then ask for all the details before you start making them. Because if you do it the other way and you start making details without the knowledge of the other person, then maybe you are going to work for nothing, because everything you did wasn't expected in the drawing. So my advice is that first you show the inks to see if everything is okay, and then ask for all the details that are going to be on the drawing. So in this part, this effect is desired, so I do it like this. When you are drawing with dots, if you keep your dots more organized, it gives us the effect that is a shadow that is part of the structure that you are drawing. But when you draw the dots a little more random, then it gives a different effect. That, for example, that it is just a shadow that is reflected in that particular photograph. So in this case, because this is always dark, then I put a lot of little points, because that is how it is. And when it is just a shadow, then I will make a different kind of dotting to show that it is different. I don't know if I explain myself. So you make a little, so you make lots of different effects depending on what you want to show or the picture that you are using. Also, if you have a lot of foldings in your structure, with the dots you can give those effects. In this case, this antosero is very flat, um, but you can search for different drawings of antoceros, and you can see what I mean. And I hope you see that the dotting effect makes these different parts really different. This one that has just the broken line apart from this one that is dotted. Also, the brush size change a lot how both structures are seen. I think we are done with these drawings. So I encourage you to start drawing, start practicing, and obviously you can download pictures from the internet or you can start drawing with you are working with. So again, this is the layout that I recommend to you. Make folders, and each folder has to have its own rulers, its own inks, its own details, draft, and the pictures that you need or the drawings that you need. And as I told you on a previous video, I strongly recommend that you separate everything because if you use just one layer for the inks, just one layer for the draft, and just one layer for the details, moving them all over the place will be very difficult. But if you have everything under folders, then you just click on the folder, click the move layer, and as easy as that. Believe me, I did it the first time like that, and it was awful. It was a nightmare to move everything because I didn't plan ahead the layout of the drawings, and when the author told me to move some things along the way, it was so awful that in the end she told me that it was okay. So she realized that it was a very complicated thing to do, so she kept the drawings like they were, but she wasn't very happy with the general layout. So that's why I now do it this way. So I think I will finish the video right now, and in the next one I am going to show you how to import it because Clip Studio Paint has some problems with the TIFF format, and the TIFF format is one of the formats that the journals may ask your drawings to be. So it will be a short video, but it will be a dedicated video because it is not as simple as you may think. So I hope to see you then. See you next time.